Hello, how's everybody doing today? My name is Tammy Davis. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a little story about, actually it's a continuation from the last video. If you haven't seen that, then you might want to check that out because it's a little bit lengthy, but it's based on a lot of recent investigations is how I put it. And I also got full disclosure. I just started sharing a lot about the things that I'm currently doing and what I strongly recommend based on the information that I'm finding. However, this is a continuation of that because as I started writing about it, and there's very specific essential oils that I'm recommending, but I'm getting a little bit more involved in it over there. I thought, you know what, I want to say a little bit here. So before I go any further, for those of you who are new to me, I am a internationally certified master clinical aromatherapist with a background in pharmacology. I specialize in the human genome, the human physiology, and basically the study of plant constituents and the way they are used for drug development, human physiology, and the interactions, potential interactions. So that's really what my specialty is. And so when I talk about things like that, that's kind of where I've been all of this time. There's been this evolution, so to speak, of my work, only because nature is organic. And while a lot of us have been coming from the aspect of let's get to the root cause and let's figure this out, with recent diagnosis of my own and other people that have been contacting me, it's time to really sink our teeth into the true root of every single health issue that we have, because it's all tied to the same thing. We have historically heard that stress kills, but we don't really know why stress kills, um, other than we get sick. But the neurochemistry of stress is significant, and it's very complex. And the thing is that stress is a mechanism of protection. It's a mechanism of survival, is really what stress is. So even when we're talking about, think about it, even mental and emotional distress, right? When you're worried about something, it's for your survival, right? If you get in, if you got a group of employees and they're all fighting one another, everybody's worried about losing their job and who's going to look good and who's going to look bad, and that. So it's all based on survival. So even if we're talking about, like I said, mental distress, it's survival. If we physically get hurt, it's survival. And in this case, with the world that we live in, it's also environmental. Now, the significant thing that came up while writing, and that link is in the box below that you can take a look at that, is the fact that aromatase, which is, we often hear about it in regards to breast cancer, aromatase inhibitors. Aromatase is a chemical that is produced by the body. And so the thing that I really kind of want to dispel here is a couple of things, and I've talked about it in previous videos, and I think it bears repeating, truthfully. And that is, we need to rethink. I'm inviting people to begin to rethink the way we qualify, label certain things. For instance, these genetic tests, okay? We hear them referred to as SNPs, SNP, okay? It means, and the way it's described is a mutation, a defect. I've heard people use the word defect. And so when we think of SNP, right, something was broken. The body's not broken, you guys. It's just not broken, okay? If you are alive and watching this, and your body's not broken, it may be having some issues, but yet it's not broken. It's surviving. It's distressed, okay? So really kind of reframing the way we approach health and wellness. So the first thing is to understand that although we don't like the functioning of our system, it is still functioning. We can improve upon the function. There's nothing wrong with that. But at least begin to see that these genomes or these epigenetic SNPs and mutations and defects are simply alterations. Chemicals as a whole have the ability to activate and deactivate various genetic processes, and especially in the liver. The liver has the enzymes are the CYP450 enzymes, and there's a number of them that are used to break down all chemicals. Pardon me. a number of chemicals. Actually, every chemical, the xenobiotics. A good example is the CYP1A2. It actually produces a type of hydroxylase that influences the adrenal cortex function. Okay. That said, it can be activated by certain things. Smoking, cigarette smoking activates it. It'll be inhibited. Activity will be inhibited by other things like quinolone or quilinone. Quilinone, I think, is how you pronounce it. Those are the antibiotics that are being fed to animals, to livestock. Now, that cuts that. What that does is that inhibits the hydroxylase. Okay, and then that in turn influences aromatase production. Again, I get into that a little bit more in the blog post. The point of that is aromatase has a purpose. Okay, it has a purpose. The purpose is to continue to influence inflammatory processes because there's something in the body that is potentially a threat. So one thing there, I mean, and you know, so there's a number of chemicals that will activate or deactivate that one particular CYP enzyme. This happens throughout the body. So to call them SNPs and mutations and defects is crazy. They're not. They do like what they call genotype testing, where they'll get a culture of people, like, people from in the maybe China, and then they'll take another sampling of people in, maybe the northeast section of the United States, and then they'll label them, ethnicity. And so they're taking a look at, they are actually trying to study and do sample tests of how, I guess, similar SNPs, if you will, between these different cultures. Here's what I want to say about that. While there are differences, obviously, between an Asian, somebody of Asian descent versus Indo-European descent, there's differences, right? Okay, there are visual differences. So that means there's going to be differences to the genes. Okay, so there's an aspect to the genome that is more of a hereditary, Mendelian inherited genes. These are what give us our appearance, and there would be some level of similarity when it comes to the way that particular genome functions in response to the environment. Okay. So I can get why they can do some genotyping, and there would be some similarities, and why they go, okay, well, a population of Caucasian women here have a higher tendency to see breast cancer than over here. It makes sense, but here's the thing. It's not 100%, number one. And number two, it's just like the plants. If you grow, let's just say, I always like to use the example lavender because that's just the first thing that comes to mind. But your true lavender, let's just say you grow it in Utah, and the next one you know is you're growing over here in Russia. Two different spots of the world, same plant, different environment. So you're going to get a different chemistry. The way the plant had to navigate the air quality, the water quality, the soil quality, all of it, the growing conditions, that will influence the chemistry of that plant. The same thing can be said for the human being. So to be looking at a panel of people, a small sampling of people, and going, okay, so this is what we found here. This must be the case for, Caucasians who live in Russia versus Caucasians who live in the United States. No, it doesn't. It can't, because they're two different environments. I was talking to one of my Amish clients just yesterday. They're up in Pennsylvania. I was born there, so and I've lived up in that area several times, so I feel a little bit more qualified to say something than somebody who's never been there. But there's some steel industry. My grandfather worked in the steel industry. My father worked in the steel industry. There's paper companies up there. My family's one side of my family actually owned the York Wallpaper Company for a while. So these paper companies and these steel industry, and the amount of coal that gets used, and of course just traffic alone, there's a lot of heavy metals in the air just because of that. So you have a higher level of what potentially could be perceived as autoimmune disorders in that area. Okay, so, but you don't see that as much in, say, here in New Mexico. There's just different air. I'm not saying we're less polluted than up there. I'm just simply saying there's a different There's just different stuff in the air. So the health issues that arise here, I mean, there's good God, there's like all kinds of, we got Sandia labs, we've got labs in Los Alamos, meaning radio, there's a lot of radiation, okay? Not to mention with the sun. So we're seeing different things occur here in New Mexico that aren't necessarily found in Pennsylvania. So it really is about the environment. So kind of just remembering that these SNPs, these mutations, these defects are not that. Doesn't mean that the body's dysfunctional in the way that it's not working properly. It's working to survive. And our job, because we have the ability to choose our words, our thoughts, and take a deep breath from time to time, deliberate deep breath, we have the ability to partner with this body. Okay, we are living inside this body. We are with this body. We can help this body because the DNA of our body cannot distinguish the difference between a true threat to the system versus a potential threat, one that we're making up with our mind. Okay, chemicals are a threat. A dog chasing after you is a threat. Whether or not Verizon's going to cut you off tomorrow, that is a potential threat, but it's not happening right now. And so learning how to dial that down is really what's most important. And that's when you're going to be able to assist your epigenome, because deep breaths like that actually send signals to the body that you're okay. And there's a switch that gets flipped because now the body knows it doesn't have to be amped and ready on high alert. It can just kind of chill for a minute. Okay, that's important to remember. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is the fact that we have this thing around chemistry in the body that I'm high in serotonin. I don't have enough serotonin. I have too much estrogen. I don't have any estrogen. I don't have any testosterone. I have, we've normalized all these things, and I keep saying this with regards to degenerative health. And personally, I feel like it's time we stop lying to our kids. Degenerative health is not inherited. It is and it isn't. Let me reframe that. It's inherited in the sense that thoughts and behaviors affect the way the genome functions. If you're more at peace and you're more at ease with things, you see less dis-ease. And all of this starts out very, very subtly. Going through some physical therapy, I have really begun to learn the subtlety of movement and actually being able to, I have to really work hard at this because I'm so used to like catastrophic movements, that a subtle movement to where I have on my back lifting my toe up, on my toe lifting my heel up, and one foot at a time, and being able to distinguish if my other hip of the opposite hip is actually lifting up. It's a strange exercise, but that's really dialing in to paying attention. And so when I talk about disease, I'm not talking about full-blown cancer or diabetes or. I'm talking about the disease that comes from the way the words that we choose, the things that we think, and the behaviors that we engage in. Try it. Try operating on normal speed for yourself, and then attempt to do something differently. And see if you can begin to feel the subtle differences, because that lack of ease is very, very subtle. And when we don't pay attention to it, it gets louder and it gets louder and it gets louder. No, I'm not saying anybody wants to get sick. What I'm saying is this is a new level of personal care that we've never been talked to about. We don't pay attention to this kind of thing. And it's those subtleties that will give you a clue as to what the body's actually doing. And we have in that moment the ability to reverse that. We can stop those behaviors and those thoughts that are producing dis-ease far sooner and we don't need to manifest the pain, the lack of sleep, and so on, the weight gain. And it doesn't have to happen, because we can look at the body and we can check out what chemicals actually happen. As I mentioned, aromatase, there's a purpose for aromatase. It's not a bad thing. The body actually produces it for a good reason. Although it's meant to be deactivated. We have histamine for good reason. We have a world of people out there living with histamine intolerance. Guess what? It's all due to this stress mechanism. And it comes back to that chemistry thing I was talking about, the chemicals. You're not producing too much cortisol, or you're not cortisol deficient. What we're looking at is a change in the way the body is utilizing these chemicals. So here's an example. Cortisol is both an inflammatory chemical as well as an anti-inflammatory chemical, depending on what the body needs. Estrogen is a reproductive hormone as well as a stress hormone, depending on what the body needs. If the body's chronically stressed, the aromatase will take testosterone in a man and convert it to estrogen. That's what it does, because estrogen is then used to activate the autonomic nervous system, is used to activate the immune system, and it becomes this ongoing cycle. So we have a population of men at much younger ages developing low T and low testosterone, and then my phone is ringing, and then suffering with ED and so forth. So it's not that the men aren't producing the testosterone, because I've had many people tell me that well, I just need to stimulate the pituitary gland. No, you're reducing it. But you're also stressed, and the more stressed you are, and then when we're exposed to an environment of endocrine disruptors, it begins to change the hormonal system. Aromatase not only converts these androgens into estrogen, it also starts to develop different steroidal hormones that are now activating this, thyroid and doing so. It's leading to all kinds of problems, which then it gets to be this big mess. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so we can talk about all these chemicals, because then ultimately what happens is calcium also activates the immune system. So if we've been exposed to chemicals that are stressing the body, and the body is on guard and it's on high alert and it's trying to protect us, it's now producing other chemicals to keep the energy system going, to keep us protected. But now calcium is no longer being used by the parathyroid. It's being used for other purposes to keep the immune system going. It actually helps to contract muscles. This is what calcium is for, okay? And then when everything's relaxed, then the body doesn't need calcium at that level. This is the reason why we're starting to see so many people with coughs and muscle spasms, because their calcium channels are activated. Did you know there's a blood pressure medication called a calcium channel blocker? Because what it's doing is it's actually calming that down. Magnesium is a calcium channel blocker. It's a natural one. So the point is that you are producing these chemicals. They're just being converted by the body for other purposes. This is exactly why I say that it's actually functioning and working. It's just producing it for other purposes. And the whole idea here is to stabilize the body. So if we're taking medications, we want to stabilize the body. If we're not taking medications, we still want to stabilize the body. It's very important to understand that very certain oils actually act like certain chemicals. There are those that act like estrogen in the body. There are those that actually can act like serotonin in the body. There are those that can actually affect dopamine in the body. So avoiding those on an ongoing basis. What I mean is, let me say that another way. We don't want to use those oils on a regular basis. We want to maybe use them sporadically, because they do have that kind of influence on us, and we do live in the kind of world that we live in. If we didn't have the world of chemicals that we have, these would be a non-issue. There wouldn't be any worry about it, but we do live in that kind of world. So being willing to monitor the types of chemicals, like I said earlier, the animals that are being fed these antibiotics are actually deactivating the CYP1A2 liver enzyme, which has been actually indicated a potential precursor for breast cancer, because it affects the aromatase production. So paying attention to your meat source. If you eat meat, grass fed, you don't want animals that are being fed these antibiotics for that reason. But recognizing that it's not that your body's not producing the chemical, it's actually just altered. And our cultural mindset is like, oh, you don't have any testosterone? Here, let me give you some testosterone. You're already making it. What we need to do is to reduce the amount of estrogen, that slow down the cortisol, right? Actually help with adaptogens. So number one, understand that you want to be more mindful of these selection of oils so that they're not taking the place of certain chemicals and already in the body. The whole, I hope I'm making sense. The whole purpose to this is to actually stabilize the system. And so the best way to do that is to use oils that are, and those are actually in this post that I'm talking about, that I'm finishing up, is to use oils that are not in any way replacing or acting like our own chemistry. You want to use adaptogenic herbs like ashwagandha, because that actually helps to regulate the cortisol, the use of cortisol. It actually helps to normalize, or helps the body normalize the cortisol levels, and so that it can be both inflammatory as well as anti-inflammatory. Um, it kind of like is this. This is what I did in the last video, but I didn't put this in there. So this one, that link is in the description box below. This is the kind that I use. I mean, good Lord, it's a third of a teaspoon. I just keep it in the freezer and it tastes like nothing. It's better than a pill because it's just straight powder. It's just, I just put it in a smoothie. Quite frankly, I mix it with the beet and pomegranate powder that I mentioned in the last video. I also add this to it. This, as I was talking about this, and it hadn't come in yet, but this is from the same company, as you can see, and it's mangosteen. See, mangosteen. And this is very high in a chemical called xanthone. This is a natural aromatase inhibitor. If all you did was beetroot and mangosteen and the ashwagandha, you would be doing your digestive system a huge favor, and you'd be helping stabilize your body, because we're not trying to, we're not trying to take the place of chemicals. This is just, in a world of environmental estrogens, this is important. You don't necessarily need to take it every single day, but every once in a while, every once in a while, it's a good idea, because again, the chemicals or the foods that we eat naturally activate and deactivate these liver enzymes depending on the body's needs. The other thing that I mentioned the other day was this vitamin B complex. And this finally came in too, as I mentioned. And the vitamin B complex is very, very important because, well, B vitamins are, number one, water soluble, so they're not going to get stored in the tissues. And number two, they're actually necessary for the folate cycle. They're necessary for the breakdown of carbohydrates. It's, the transfer of methyl groups. It's very important that we get our B vitamins. It's also important with the CBS gene, for the production of glutathione is how I want to say that. And so taking a B complex, but you want a good food-based B complex, because the body is better able to use it as opposed to ones that are produced in the lab. So I highly recommend that. I've been using New Chapter products for a very long time. So that said, the whole idea behind this and the work that I'm doing is more along the lines of working with the environment and working with both internally and externally, and no longer attempting to control or regulate chemicals. I realize I mentioned the mangosteen, but quite frankly, aromatase, although it has been talked about in relation to breast cancer and prostate cancer, it has also been indicated in autoimmune, and so is estrogen. Estrogen has been linked to all the autoimmune issues that we're facing. So, and it's not that you're not producing enough. It's the fact that we're exposed to too many. Again, so there's essential oils that act like estrogen in the body. We want to cut those out. There's foods that actually, these the phytoestrogens we're familiar with. We want to limit those because there's so many chemicals that are known to disrupt the endocrine system that it's important that we avoid and do what we can. And again, even if you took mangosteen once a week, just put it in a smoothie once a week, that's good, because you're doing what you can to support your body with not having toxic levels of estrogen build up or cause more inflammation in the system. Because although estrogen is a reproductive hormone, it is equally a stress hormone. And as I mentioned earlier, it activates both the autonomic system as well as the immune system. So being aware of that. So again, this, ashwagandha, and this, and a little bit of beetroot and pomegranate powder that I mentioned in the last one. I could go get it right now, but it's by New Therapy. It's actually very, very good. There's no sweetener in it. It's very, very good. That alone right there will help your body metabolize foods much better in the sense that you're actually beginning to fully utilize the nutrients that you're consuming. And that's the reason for the oils, because they are also signaling molecules and they will support a super rich or nutrient rich diet. So I think I'm going to end there. I got, if you have any questions, let me know. Please visit my website, synergessence.com, sign up for my newsletter. Share this, like it, subscribe. Yeah, join in, because we're on a roll now. We're on a roll to really help people stabilize their systems so that we can better navigate this environmental shitstorm that we're living in. All right, you guys take care, and I will talk to you later.